All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Siddha, and today we're with Anirudh Koul, streaming live on Facebook and recording on Zoom. And today we're going to be having a really nice interview with Anirudh. And if I were to introduce Anirudh, I briefly looked at his LinkedIn profile and I looked at the list of awards that he had. And the list just went on and on and on. But to give you a brief overview, Anirudh is a noted AI expert. He's spoken at the UN and has given TEDx speeches about the impact of AI for the blind community. He's a former scientist at Microsoft AI and Research, where he founded the application called Seeing.AI, and that's often considered the most used technology amongst the blind community. He has previously led teams, deployed innovation to 1 billion users. He's been the head of AI and research at IRA. And during his time, IRA was also recognized by the Time magazine as one of the best inventions of 2018. Great job, Anirudh. The IEEE has called his work as life-changing, and his work has also been lauded by world leaders, including Justin Trudeau, Theresa May. And one interesting thing that I noticed is that some of the awards that were mentioned in Anirudh's profile were also given to those people who later on won Nobel Prizes or Turing Awards. So I think it's safe to say that Anirudh, you keep in great company. And that's why I feel that it's an honor that I got the opportunity to co-author a book with you. And yeah, that is a really, really long introduction, but it's befitting that you've put in a lot of hard work to achieve everything. So welcome, Anirudh.
That's too kind. That's too kind.
All right. So to the entire audience here, we will be taking in questions both through the Zoom group chat as well as on Facebook. So I'll be monitoring both simultaneously. And we also have some previous questions that had been sent in by members of the Flow group. So I'll be going over those as well. All right, let's start. So tell us a little bit about yourself, Anirudh. Tell us a little bit about the journey that you've had, starting from your undergrad days to a little bit about today as well.
Yeah, so I grew up in Delhi uh, and eventually went to Thapar University. Um, got that bug for programming and gradually, really like to build projects, things which are funky, weird, but something which had a pattern inside them that, you could try to extract. So, you know, while so slowly my programming started to get better, and then eventually I was looking at like how do I get towards more research. And so my dream always was to do a PhD, which is not a dream now in retrospect, but it used to be a dream that PhD would be the ultimate goal in life. uh, and my grades were a little too good to get even a general master's. So I studied at Thapar University, got a pretty good start there. And then about in the third year, transferred over to a university in Canada called Dalhousie University to continue studies and learned a bit more, got out of my shell and realized that apparently I used to think I was good at some parts in computer science, which is totally false. Uh, got into the imposter syndrome and literally stopped talking for 2 years and just, do my work. From that, things happened which led me to Yahoo on the research side. Um, Stayed there 4 years and realized that apparently I'm rebuilding the wheel again and again in the field of natural language processing. So I applied for universities and eventually went to Carnegie Mellon University. Uh, Learned again through that imposter syndrome, but this time a little bit better. I was a little set for that, and graduated there. And eventually came to Microsoft, which was an amazing learning journey for me. Just getting access to the data set, the question really became like, what can you do with this? So wherever I could find some sort of data or opportunity, I would have a day job of like what I'm doing and a night job of what is the next thing that can be built. Uh, and so through that, a lot of projects came out through a lot of hackathons, through a lot of by meeting people, and just like collaborating and seeing what is that next thing we can build. Some of those projects actually ended up becoming real products or real features in HoloLens, in iPhone apps, in Microsoft Office. If you have Microsoft Office, there's a button there where you press and you can dictate your speech pretty well. It wasn't pretty well like 4 or 5 years back, but the journey of seeing something become a product was just amazing. Uh, and more importantly, turning things which are ideas and you are totally unfunded towards things which are funded and out there was the other interesting part. So it's not a technical journey only. Post that, I joined a startup called Ira, which works and used to make smart glasses for the blind. It's now a phone app basically. Um and through that whole life, I think it taught a lot of interesting experiences of turning ideas to reality, and just the excitement that comes when people get together to think of things which might seem a little hard, and then somebody else has an idea of how to solve it. So right now, I also am an ML lead for NASA's FDL, which is Frontier Development Labs, and what else? Oh yeah, the coolest one is basically this thing called RoboRace, which is this autonomous car where you get the hardware and you make the AI system for running this car. So I'm working with a team at Carnegie Mellon University to build that brain. And yeah, that's the short and sweet story.
So you saved the best for the last. That's
Yes,
amazing. Robo Race is pretty cool. So tell us a little bit about how you really, kept on and on iterating and prototyping regularly to build such amazing projects.
so I think I used to be better at programming, 15, 16 years back. But my skill set, there's one thing is can you program? That's one part. But the other part is can you actually turn what your thoughts are and show it to the world? And there is proof in the pudding if you can show uh, a prototype of it instead of saying this is a great idea or that is a great idea. So while I was at Yahoo, one thing I would do is that every 2 weeks I would secretly be developing a prototype and then every 2 weeks show it to my boss. And my boss was really encouraging on that. So so by doing this habit of trying to build things, I didn't know JavaScript, but I'm pretty sure I can copy somebody else's code and show this and like join things with it. So that part of constantly building things obviously taught me a few things beyond C, which apparently should not be the thing people write on their resume. But more importantly, now that I can demonstrate these ideas, if I ask and go to somebody that, hey, we should be building this, people would listen because they can use it, try it out. So that got me into hackathons. So hackathons are basically this really compressed uh, 2 days or 7 days or 24 hours period of
Like a
time.
sandbox.
Exactly. You have a deadline that you have this time free, go and build what you want, but you have this much time, and at the end you have to show something. So I started going to these hackathons, and I think I had like one barometer, which was that whatever you work, it needs to solve for an insane user value. And thanks to my transparent background, that is not the best value. They should segment it better. but it should have solve for an insane user value, so it has some sort of a market. It basically has a reason to be in the market. It needs to have something defensible or something hard in it. Often that means for me machine learning and data. And finally, it needs to be something cool that is marketable, that people would like to actually talk about, when they see it. So with these three things, I would go to the hackathon and try to build things, and get decent results, and also realize that I don't have enough skills to build things. One time, I built something, and one of the executive vice presidents at Microsoft said, "This is the coolest thing I have seen, and this is the ugliest thing I have seen." And basically, that got me that the next person I need always on my team is a designer. The third person I always need in my team is a full stack engineer. And step by step, you want to bring people who are complementary to your skill sets. Uh, and so then I started building these teams where you have 2 people, 3 people, 5 people, 7 people, 9 people, 16 people, 25 people. And this 25 number kind of got, these people have never met each other in life. Somebody is a factory person working in a factory in China. One person is in HoloLens in London. Somebody's in Canada. And all are, in different offices. But that fact of running the team where you have a vision, you have a goal of 7 days. And how would you achieve that goal in 7 days? So Microsoft has this hackathon called 1 week hackathon, where you go in, and for 7 days, your boss is not going to ask you, what are you working on? Because the CEO has given this opportunity. So why won't you use that? So I would basically think about the problem to solve for a couple of, like 2 months, 3 months, interview enough number of people to build that story. You'd go to the hackathon. Day zero, we would actually have fake APIs running in the first hour, so that nobody is stuck in building something. Like everybody knows what they have to do. And 7 days later, we would have a functioning prototype, which can be sent for dog food, which means you can send it to real users. 7 day, at that point, we would have a real Kickstarter type video. We will have a story, we'll have a pitch, and we'll immediately send it to users, instrument it, and show that people are using it. We'll be doing A/B testing, and once we have that data, we would send it to someone big, like a corporate vice president, and say, "Hey, here's something. Here's our video pitch. We should have a meeting." And usually now, because you can try this thing out, more often than not, those no's would become yeses. Uh, and so that would give our teams an opportunity to present. So now when you are in a room where you are trying to ask for venture funding, for example, uh, the risk is high. So a good way of asking for funds is, you can say, "Hey, give me fund," or you can also maybe lower your risk and say, "Hey, if we have 3 months of time to iterate, we can potentially achieve this much." There's a lot of ambiguity, but it's just 3 months of effort. And just going through that journey of asking and de-risking things, uh, you're able to progressively do better than maybe what you asked for 3 months. So always uh, under promise, over deliver. And so my teams would, get amazing things out. Often it would be, that underground till it becomes overground. So going from unfunded to funded. But just watching what some of these people have done and what they have done in their careers. I had the opportunity to work on this thing called Dictate, which became that button in Microsoft Office.
Yeah, I use that all the time.
Yeah, it's amazing. But just
Yeah.
the 30-second story is, we go to the hackathon, 2 days, we have this thing working. But at that time, when we go to Microsoft Office, for example, this would not be the thing that they would want to, put it. I mean, it's a hard sell. So what we did is we said our success would be if we can get 30 users. We went to a cafeteria, basically started giving out cookies and getting users to try it out. We did the A/B test and proved that without this versus with this, how it changes productivity. Obviously, it had some science behind it also. So we got that. Once we had that, we basically went to the person who runs the televisions at Microsoft, and programmed that so that now we have 1,500 users using it. So now that we have 1,500 users using it, we have the data. We go through this pipeline called Microsoft Garage, which is basically a way for people to get their products out without branding. And we do a little bit marketing on our own, and we get 50,000 users using it. And at that
That's
point, it was a
incredible.
question like, who's working on this and when do we release it? So over that period of time, the word error rate started to improve in the product because now more people outside are using it. And then when we take it through proper privacy level of what Microsoft Office is known for, we release it in the in the main product. And I guess Office is installed in a billion devices. So the story that we had the success criteria of 30 users, and now how many potential installs it has to a billion, I think that's pretty amazing. And the power of really prototyping in hackathons.
Yeah, true. So just to summarize, and I've been taking notes here. So yeah, I'm really interested in all your stories. So just to summarize what you said, the impact of your work really makes a difference. So when you start on a project, really try to understand what is the impact it can make. So for example, from 30 users, increasing productivity. So something along those lines that can really stand out to the people you're pitching the idea to.
Hmm?
Then I also liked your idea of introducing hackathons as a test bed where you can fail early, fail often, and eventually succeed, and who knows, deploy to a billion devices.
I mean, you don't need to go
Um,
to a hackathon. You can do it at home,
of course, yeah,
The
something on
main
the side.
point is that you need to have a deadline for anything you do in life,
Yeah,
whether it's technical or non-technical. Otherwise, it won't happen.
yeah,
Determination and perseverance just go out of the bank if you don't keep realistic goals. Uh,
true. That's
the
a very
other
good
thing I
point.
will mention is whenever you start something, uh, always think about it the opposite angle. You want a job, think from the point to get the job, what I have to do backwards instead of forwards. You want to pitch for a product, think on what is that, the press release that will be going out. What is that features that people want, and then started going and solve, going towards, because you might not even know software engineering today. But if you always are thinking from linearly from today to forward, uh, you can do better by going back to front. And actually, Amazon follows this principle, which I learned pretty late.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So if you can really understand and visualize our goals, it at least gives us a path forward. And I think that's really good in, especially for beginners, if they can catch on to that early on, because of course we all want um, to be in the company of Nobel Prize and Turing Award winners. All right, so I'm going to take a question from the Zoom chat. So, one interesting thing that I think is relevant to what you just discussed is a question from Vignesh, and he asks, how do you manage scope creep with your research projects? And again, this is extended to hackathons as well, because
Mhm.
of course, when we participate in hackathons, we'll have multiple projects going on parallelly.
Yeah, beautiful question. So, scope creep is the evil that lies in any excited person you will meet. Uh, my so everybody has their own way. Usually, proper professional software engineering teams, they define what they want to achieve, and they say that this will be what we'll achieve at V1. And usually, what happens is what they promise, they actually do lesser than that because life happens in the middle. Um, on the other side of the spectrum, I usually try to only ask for the simplest, smallest MVP potentially possible, so that if this works, we can always prove that next things can be done. And more often than not, uh, just by asking those incremental, it can both be a case of scope creep because people get this done and they say, okay, we are done in 4 days for what we promised in 7. I say, no, no, then let's actually add a little bit more because we have the opportunity to go further if you have done before it. Uh, but I think the one, so two parts are in research, you often don't know if you will even be able to achieve this because it is ambiguous to begin with. You don't even know the model will train at the end. You just have a good hunch towards that would it work. So being very clear on like what we essentially want and what is that minimum viable prototype that we should be considering. And what happens if we are able to achieve it? If you can answer that, truthfully with your team on day one, that helps. The other thing is you always want to give yourself a buffer time, uh, because no matter what you build, it will have bugs, and fixing the bugs and improving that will take a lot more time. So there's a rule of 80-20%, which is uh, uh, 20 basically majority of the users will use 20% of the features 80% of times. So just nailing down that 20% which will be used 80% of the times, instead of keeping on polishing more and more, that is one way to reduce that scope creep, by focusing on that. The other is that instead of like saying and promising to yourself, I'll just release it out to the world, what you do is you get to that 20% and release it to the most trusted bunch of people, your friends. Once you do that, then you go alpha, you show it to more people. You get their feedback, improve it, and then to beta, more and more people till you get to production. So by constantly having that circle of improving, you know that maybe at the beta level you have much lesser features, but at the alpha level and to your dev circle, you have a lot more features out there. So that's the world of project management for you.
Yeah, so basically the loop of testing and making sure that all the features are tried and tested when you go to alpha releases or beta releases is really important.
Mhm.
And I'm glad that you mentioned um, getting feedback from the users, because that is the perfect segue to the next question. So the next question on the Zoom chat we have is from Ikram, and they ask, in hackathons, how do you share the end product's vision with the new team members? And how important is it to bring everyone together on the same vision in a short period of time?
Yeah, I remember the days when people would not want to join my projects. They would not even want to touch it from a mile away because how frankly crazy they sounded at that time. Now today it seems like, oh, this will be just calling 3 lines in core ML, uh, but not back in 2013 or 14. Uh, so one thing that I do is, so what I used to do was I would use the heck out of LinkedIn to find people and find their backgrounds and internally find which teams they are working in. Because often what happens is you find these people who have an interest but don't have like the day job in that particular field, but have done some things in university, or people who are like just good at learning things and can prepare for something. Um, and so I would just get to those people, and often some of these would be experts, and try to get them to have that discussion to both see two things. One is knowledge is great, but do they have the tenacity to get things done, which often turns out to be two different things. Being an expert does not mean that the person can actually get things done fast. The second thing is like how hungry the person is for making things happen, and really you want to find those people who will move earths to make something happen. I went to a hackathon where we needed somebody on the team, and one of our teammates was on vacation in India, and we needed him to work on a hardware piece. So he actually flew back in right in time from the airport to the hackathon site for like, and stayed there for like 2 3 days to make things happen. And that's like, what is the definition of dedication? So I would interview many people, call it an interview, call it a conversation, but really see that like would they be up for that kind of a challenge, and like sell them my vision of what this would be in 2 to 3 years, and the fact that there is no guarantee this would even work to begin with. But that is the opportunity. Why waste that opportunity on not doing anything worthwhile versus something that might have something high risk high reward kind of a proposition? And I had actually had times where I had to actually say, try to actually first say no, like to people, just because are they just trying to join the group just because they think that because of the track record this would be an exciting thing, or are they really interested? And then watching their inner happiness when they start discussing the intricacies of the problem, and that's when like this person would be ready for a challenge like that. And those people, just watching through their careers in life, have just done amazing, because they are not looking for this opportunity because it's great for career today, or it's great for something. They just want to attack that problem, and they're hungry. And that's the one word I define as exceptionalism. uh, some of those people, I have a friend, Prabhav, uh, who joined Dictate, and he wanted to learn machine learning, and he has a software engineering background. He worked on this, became an expert, and today he develops the voice of Siri. If you download Siri's Indian voice, he developed it, he and his team, right? But the same person 2 years back, 3 years back, did not have a machine learning background. Another friend, Anand, he is the tech lead of at the speech team today. Back then, he was working on something completely different. Many people went from engineering to machine learning background, data science background, uh, and that was like the amazing thing to watch their careers progress because they showed their exceptionalism. And I'll take that back to that word exceptionalism. When I'm interviewing people, we have these thousands of resumes that would come for uh, different roles, and just the ratio of job to resumes can be very high at a big company like Facebook, like Google, like Microsoft. Like, how do you sort amongst these? Is it keywords that you're sorting amongst? Sure. So there has to be some commonality between what the job requirement is based on those keywords. But the other is like, okay, to get them to the job interview, there needs to be some form of demonstration by these people, which is showing that this person can show that leadership quality that we discussed this project once, they can take care of it. Whether it is somebody starting in their career or whether it is somebody, somebody who has been there, done that. And that word is, to me, that word exceptionalism is, have they contributed to GitHub on a project that was, some significantly hard? Do they actually get excited about problems that they solved a problem which was not already mentioned on Hello World, Titanic, or maybe beyond? Right? Like, what are those projects that they were hungry to go and build? And that literally solves it. Like, it doesn't need to be education for which I would bring this person to an interview. It is, how are they demonstrating beyond just that beginner Coursera course self? Like, they have shown that exceptionalism towards learning. So
That was a really good answer, and you touched upon a variety of target questions like how did you get your first break, right? How do you there was a question here that I thought really fit well into the answer that you already gave, which is how do you make quick pivots or how do you change your approaches depending on if you're getting the results or not? And this question was asked by Anmol. And I think during hackathons, given that it's such a test bed to experiment and fail quick, you will quickly realize if you're getting the results or not.
mhm.
So what more do you think can be mentioned on the same note, that how does your approach change if your project doesn't work out initially as you expected, and how do you pivot to that?
Yeah. So there are different motivational slogans different companies have. There's a company in Bay Area called Pinterest, and their logo is win or learn. There is, in summary, there is no fail, but win or learn is their
That's
logo,
amazing. Yeah.
right? And which just explains the whole part. Like, you don't ever fail; you always learn from that experience. So 2 days after that experience, 7 days after that experience, you would have, on one hand, learned what was wrong, so that the next time you're going to do, you're going to do things right. You probably have learned a skill set which you just did not have. You got the maturity to propose better projects, see that vision at the end. If you think that my initial projects actually uh, went out always from the hackathon, I think I saw a lot of no's. And that took me to the journey of how to convert those no's to yeses. And it would often happen that it's not a fault in the project, it's some legal issue that it might arise 1 year after you would release, which I just never knew about. There's so many different places which are not always technical, which are not always product market fit, that can come out. It could be organizational. So just that learning only comes by doing and not by reading. I mean, you can read Harvard Business Review and learn it, which I think I should start doing now. uh,
Well, I don't think we want to give you more work than you already have, but learning is always a good idea. So, another question that we have from Sagar from the Facebook chat is that we know, there are multiple technologies out there, and now that AI is mainstream, there are so many options available. So how do we make the right choice, and we make sure that the option that we're choosing is actually proficient for the task at hand?
So AI is just a tool. It's a means to an end. Like it's part of the journey, but it is not the end. The end result is what you are building for your user. What are you building for your resume, or maybe whatever somebody would be using at the end? And AI is a tool. If you meet a geophysicist, they don't care about the fact it's AI, ML, or it's a loop with an if-else statement. What they want is, how do I get my job done? It just so happens that AI has uh, become so good enough that it keeps surprising us on a daily basis. And we feed into the hype that everything needs AI in it when you can do things much more simpler, right? And so I'm going to say that always, if you're thinking about MVP, what is the fastest, easiest way to build things? And in your
Yeah.
V2, well, you build a V0.01. In your V0.02, after 2 days, maybe you can attack AI. The other spectrum also is, so when you, let's say, want to do something in physics, in chemistry, in any other field, the way you do it is you first go to undergrad, study first year, second year, third year, fourth year. If you get a good GPA, then you go to first year master's, second year master's. If you ace that, then you go to first year PhD, second year, third year, fourth year, fifth year, and you make all these contributions to make a novel contribution to the world. It's a journey which is long, arduous, and frankly, applaud worthy. But in the field of AI, it's the opposite. Somebody who's at the top of field in AI will, put in their, blood and sweat and their electricity bill to train a state-of-the-art model and then release that model in public. And you, whether you are a beginner or an advanced expert, if you're starting out, you just download that model and try to run it for your task, and you advance the field with your contribution. So that journey of going from, high school to undergrad to masters to PhD basically becomes shorter in the field of AI. And part of the reason why this is big, part of it is, now that it's becoming easy, it's becoming abstract. uh, as they say the word democratize, it's slowly getting into no code tools. Like, you don't need to know how to code. There is a tool called Ludwig from Uber. There is customvision.ai from Microsoft. There is Runway ML. These three tools are great examples of, without a line of code, you can get somebody who's just starting out. Back in 2000s, there was Weka, then RapidMiner, Azure.
I've used Weka.
You use Weka, right? Don't use it
Yeah.
for a big memory problem, it will crash, but you get the point. The point is that I used to use it before I knew machine learning, and I actually built machine learning projects when I did not know how the algorithm works. Because what was interesting was that I was still motivated to solve the problem. So at the end, you're trying to find what is the solution to solve my problem. Uh, Before you get dive into deeper into things. And that's the cool part. You can be an entrepreneur who just needs an API. You don't need to, you can boast on your company's website, like, about 60% of European companies say that they are using AI when they don't. But the point is, you could literally be using an API from one of the big three providers and get your job done, instead of, or you just might be a more researcher persona who wants to do that. So find the means to an end and not the vice versa.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I also like the fact that you touched upon blood, sweat, and tears and electricity, because in AI we have this thing called figuring out the carbon footprint of training your model. So even interesting tools like that keep the job pretty interesting.
Mhm.
Um, One more thing that you touched upon was that tools these days are much accessible compared to previously, right? So we had Weka previously, and today we have like CNTK, Cognitive Vision Toolkit. Ludwig, Runway ML, and so many others. So how do you actually make sure that these tools are fitting into the MVP that you're trying to build? And this is a question from Abhinav, or a summarization of his question.
Paraphrasing.
Yeah, paraphrasing.
Okay. I think uh, the first thing is always, okay, what am I building? And for the thing that I'm building, what are the mini modular components I would need? And sometimes it's a pipeline. So people in the world of natural language processing are infamously known for building pipelines because no problem can be done like start to end before deep learning came. Usually problems could not be done like literally from start to end. Usually it would be, okay, I take a piece of text, I then, do some select which are the words and features and backgrounds and unigrams and
Processing.
clean the text.
Yeah.
That is one module. Now that I have it, I will run it through like a part of speech tagger. Then I will do this, I'll do that. And you come and go through the steps. If you're building IBM Watson, it's not one component. It's literally uh, a series of 10 plus smart, intelligent things that have to combine together and build that flowchart. And when you build business plans, you build that flowchart. It's not start to end journey. Uh, so, in a very similar way, if you can identify those individual subparts that are achievable, because nobody will be giving you a pre-built model on your table always, because if it had to be done, somebody would have already built a startup out of it. I mean,
Yeah.
that idea, right?
Yeah.
So the point I'm getting at is find those individual parts that you can combine together to reach your final application. I'll give you this one simple example. We were building this app for blind users called Seeing.AI, and the uh, blind users told us. So blind users said, "Hey, you know what we need? We need to recognize products." And we said, yeah, that's easy. So all we need to do is build an app, use the camera, attach a barcode reader to it, and it will barcode reading libraries are all there, and we'll just be done with it. Right? Sounds easy. Took us a day and a half to build it, and we started, feeling happy. Oh, we did something good. Start walking around with our collars up. Uh, we gave it to a blind user, and they first slapped us. And then they said, don't you realize the fact that I don't know where the barcode is? What is a barcode reading library going to do for me? And that's when you realize, yeah, like there are thousands of barcode readers out there, but blind users don't use it because how would you even find it? I'm sure if you have gone to a checkout counter at a local store and did self checkout, how long it takes for barcode reading to happen. So we went back, and basically what we did is we trained thousands of barcodes, took photos of barcodes at different angles, different lighting, different orientation, and then trained a convolutional neural network so that the more the area of the barcode is, the more we will then attach a beeping sound to it. So the first component is a CNN, which can predict the area and then attach a sound. And the tempo of the sound, the beeps per minute, is proportional to the amount of area. And now, you use the app and you move things around, and it will just start giving you that beeping sound. And you might be moving a thing in front of your app, but it will recognize it. And so there was a charity in Australia which raised to do this. Previously you had to buy a $1,300 laser barcode scanner, right? And a charity raised $2 million plus to give people these barcode scanners with laser coming out of it, like you use at Target, Walmart. And now like a simple free app on the market can like do exactly that, so you can save that money. But the point is, this is like a series of modules that you mix. Now, for us, luckily, somebody had invented CNNs back in 1989, right? So we just needed to find what is that thing to train, where can we get the data, is it robust in the real physical environment, and you make things happen. And this also puts the point that it's not all technical; it's also HCI. Like never underestimate the power of design. As you build things, we actually had needed the help of somebody working on sound, and luckily we got the person Jeannie Parsons, who designed the voice of Cortana, to just provide these sounds. So that's pretty exciting when you find these models and combine them together. And I
That's pretty
apologize if I
interesting.
digress.
No, that was pretty interesting. I think, so far we've really dived deep into hackathons, how to build an MVP for projects, how do we make sure that everybody's on the same page when developing projects. And I think, this even reflects to teams in the industry, because obviously everybody in the same team has to be on the same page. They have to be working towards the same goal. So a great amount of learning here. Now, we're going to slightly switch gears and talk about career development. So, I have a very interesting question that has been submitted by Jaspreet. And the question is, what courses did you take in CMU?
Oh God. Okay, I think you got the answer there. I think my CME profs won't be happy. Uh, so actually, there's an interesting story. When I was choosing universities, I was asking people, like which universities to choose from, and a lot of people in industry were talking about Carnegie Mellon, and eventually I realized why. So I wanted to, let's say, take a machine learning course, and in the first semester there were 5 introductory machine learning courses attacking from different angles. One of them was like totally applied machine learning. Then there was like a machine learning, but master's level. There was one machine learning PhD level, but this is introductory. So what do we make of it, right? Then there was a machine learning, but from a statistical point of view. And then there was a machine learning from a more, like signal processing point of view. So 5 courses in machine learning at the same time offered in different departments because they were catering to different viewpoints, and that kind of showed me the beauty that the coursework there was a lot of variety of coursework that I would almost never be able to finish. So, and I also realized that I can't attend these courses and even graduate because sometimes it will just go over my head. So what I would do is that I would take some courses for credits and then just sit in the classes for many of them. So I think I sat in way more classes than are like maybe on my official transcript. In fact, I took a class on juggling at Carnegie Mellon, uh, and fun stuff. My teacher at juggling, she this was like in 2011 2012. So she taught a jog and juggling. There were classes and like different things which you won't even imagine, not to do with tech. And then 2019, I'm watching CNN, open the television, and I notice my juggling teacher is standing on stage with the Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella at a conference with 100,000 people, showing off the features of HoloLens, where she's a principal scientist. And the point is like the world is
Incredible.
so small. Of
Yeah.
when you meet people, you'll eventually see them doing amazing things. She built a startup; it got sold eventually. That was amazing. Um, Another good example is a couple of my teammates were like in the initial founding team of Duolingo. Uh, so like I worked with them, and they have done things. Couple of my teammates for their class project built some projects for a small startup company for dynamic pricing, and that company got sold to Home Depot. Uh, so like the people you meet are like doing these amazing things. So I would tell them to teach me some of the parts to solve the homework problems. So I was just grateful to be with them.
Yeah.
And those same connections now, watching them over 10 years in industry where they have gone. Uh, one of my roommates ended up 2 to 3 times lucky in his career in startup getting acquired. Yeah, life is a journey at the end.
Yeah. Very prolific. So it's interesting that you mentioned juggling. I recently saw a documentary about Claude Shannon. And after he wrote his very famous information theory paper, he actually got interested in juggling and wrote a lot about how juggling is relevant to information theory and the amount of information that we can pass. So this is something that I think comes again and again in a lot of the discussions, which is information theory. But anyways, let me not digress. We have a question on Facebook from Raman, and he's asking, did you also learn the maths behind various machine learning algorithms, which he has received as a suggestion for most people? And then he also mentions the book that you've written. Is that a good starting point for beginners to start on their AI journey?
I can say bad, and then that will probably not be the best answer. Okay. Uh, so maybe I'll take a step back and uh, so my what I in school I was not a great student. Similarly in university I'm not. I have proof that I'm not a great student. My GPA in one of those semesters out of 10 was 4.69. Uh, so if you want to like measure me, I think that's a great start. Later in life the GPA maybe improved because I had to, I did what I had to do. But I think that should probably show you my analytical skills are exactly at that GPA level. Uh, but what always worked in the one thing that helped me do things was that I needed a problem to solve to figure out how to solve it instead of trying to study something for the sake of studying but with no hope. And over my journey, then now I started teaching people when they would ask me how do I get started, and I would see where the common failing would happen. And the biggest fail would happen in people's approach towards learning is that they start from like the very basic without an end reason for why they are doing it other than hey I want a career at the end. Like that's a very ambiguous thing to say, right? If you think about it, uh, right? So what I found was that you need to be confident at every level in life to get to the next level, or else you'll be just be like I'm just inundated with things that I don't understand, and you'd go through that drought of depression when you think that you just don't know and there's just so much to learn. So the fastest, quickest trick to learning anything, and there are a couple which I can go over, is to find a project that you are really motivated to solve and try to solve this quick enough. Now, I'm not going to say that go and solve StarCraft because it took OpenAI and a team of maybe like 50 people, couple of years to get there. I'm not saying that. But I'm saying like find one tiny problem that you can solve in a weekend. And in that attempt to solve it, you end up getting confident like, holy shit, I just solved this in a weekend. Like, I can do this. Guys, I can do this,
Confidence building.
right? Like, you get
Yeah.
that confidence. And so then next you attack the next problem, which was slightly out of your comfort zone, right? So, A, you need to get uncomfortable. That is for sure. Don't assume people are teaching you and like, yeah, I just learned that. Like, unless you can show for it. But while you're doing that, you also have a showcase to tell the world on your LinkedIn, on Medium blog, on Towards Data Science that, hey, I solved this, right? So unless you have something to show for, your inner motivation will die. You can keep yourself motivated for a day, for a week, for a month, but long term, this doesn't work out. So at Microsoft, uh, I needed people to join my teams to do AI, but most of them were in engineering, who had this impression that you need to have a PhD to uh, to get into AI. And so if it's 2000, 13, 14, 15, 16, and even in 2020, you have people still have the impression that they need a PhD. And I would have to explain to them that, come and work with me. I'll teach you what you need to know in an hour. Uh, Majority of things you need to know in the industry, like 90 to 95% is very common. It's that word called transfer learning. If you learn transfer learning, at least on the industrial side, you know how to do it and you just need to figure out how to apply it to your problem. You need to figure out how to scale it on the cloud. You need to figure out how to make things more efficient. You need to know how to find that data and find flaws in your model. And as you're doing it, you will be like, why did that happen? And that will make you curious to learn the theory. So learn theory for the sake of like trying to find why your model is working instead of like learning the theory from the basics and then trying to go towards the model. And so that learn by doing, learn by project building has been like when I do A/B testing of people I mentored and who went which way, turned out to be the best way to build and have something to show for. I wanted to tell
Yeah.
you about three stories right there. This happened in Siddha's journey. So Siddha, when uh, I think last AMA we mentioned about Siddha went to a hackathon. Uh, 43 hours, she was the only person to actually keep working. And I asked her, like, what do you want to work on? She said, machine learning. So we found a project for her to learn in machine learning and then work in deep learning in 2014 to build an app for people who have profound hearing loss to recognize sound. But that was a very uncomfortable project to work on if you think from a point of the tooling that day, but also like sound recognition, and that she didn't have. But she had a goal why she was working towards that goal. And just because she had that to show for and a machine learning project to show for, which would beat projects in Kaggle, uh, she had a story to apply for CERN, Carnegie Mellon, for her jobs eventually, and that like is like a one thing leads to the next to the next to the next. So would that be right if I just told you to start studying PRML today? It's
Yeah.
a background,
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. I
right?
would wholeheartedly agree. Yeah.
So that was like one part of like how to learn anything, pretty much like have a motivation. So during that journey, I started giving these speeches at Microsoft, teaching engineers, and these common threads started to come on. Like this is how you teach someone who might not have a background and turn them into a professional software engineer who can do AI. And so that ended up being like a common thing in conferences that people want also seem to like. So that became, by working with Siddha and Meher Qasim, we three have different backgrounds to combine into, okay, what is the world of AI? How do you get to, training your own models in 30 lines? Okay, how then do you scale it up to Google, Facebook, Microsoft scale? From a novice to a startup level engineer to a high scale engineer, how do you benchmark it? Then how do you take it to the cloud? How do you bring it to mobile phones? How do you get it to devices? How do you bring it to autonomous cars? And how do you bring it to train from video games? And I kid you not, last year at CMU, I went and gave this thing that the last page of the book is a photograph of RoboRace. And these students at CMU took that chapter, built it, did well, and eventually ended up at RoboRace, which was like sort of a joke I was telling.
Kind of recursion.
Exactly. Like if you have read this book so far, maybe RoboRace is the next thing. And that actually happened for real. Similarly, at the Frontier Development Labs, one of the chapters, chapter 4, is about how do you build large scale search engine at Google scale. That chapter is the basis for code where we are trying to run it on 30 petabytes of data to find atmospheric phenomena, right?
That's
So,
amazing. Yeah.
but the key thing is you need to have a project in mind, or you try to follow it and put it on your resume to get started. I wanted to mention a 1 minute quick story of how to learn, which is another fascinating part. Um, so, a lot of times I wanted to go to conferences like technical conferences, not research ones, to learn something. But the cost of going to the conferences was extraordinarily high, which I couldn't pay, or I couldn't, my bosses wouldn't pay. I mean, I didn't even dare to ask them, like, who would pay $2,000, right? So, what I would do is I would pretend to be an expert in a new fangled area and read up a little bit on it, find all the key terms, and apply to the conference, which is like in 4 or 5 months, and say I'm an expert in this area. I have some uh, and I have some previous background, so you can see I have some expertise in other things also. And I'll be a speaker. And if you are a speaker, you get a free ticket to the conference to listen to others. So I'd apply there, and they would say, okay, let's accept him. And I would say, great. So I have 6 months. I'll learn this thing. And then time goes on. Then I'm looking at my calendar like, holy shit, the conference is actually a week ago, and I have not read anything. So for that 1 week, I would go underground. I would print the heck out of what is that the state of the art. Print out binders full of papers of this, and for 1 week, basically just read, summarize, understand, and build a presentation. And basically, at the end of the week, I would be at a level where I could go and have a discussion with somebody who would be like the expert in that field, who knows everything, and not be still be able to have a conversation and not be totally dumb. But that 1 week deadline would put me and make me deeply understandable about that area. But because I was more practical, I would find the flaws in that area also, which the research papers would not like critique it, and find the practical ways, the TLDR versions, the ELI5 versions of how to explain that. And that forcing function would teach me things, and that would eventually become part of my career. So the point is that you always need a forcing function, deadlines, maybe applying to conferences pretending to be somebody you are not. Fake it till you make it, essentially. But that ended up results. So I tell people, if you want to lose weight, tell your friends you're going to lose weight. And if you don't, publicly share them on Facebook, or like tell it on Facebook that you're going to do that. If you're going to get into AI, tell a couple of your close knit friends that you're going to do that. And if you don't, they don't see progress from you month to month, like hold yourself accountable in some way. And accountability matters.
Yeah, accountability is definitely important. And so we have a very interesting question that Harshit asked.
Mhm.
So he mentioned that he recently read a blog by Andre Karpathy, who's the director of AI at Tesla. And in this blog, he talks about biohacking. And Anirudh, I've known you for quite some time, and you have a very strict regimen of what to eat, what not to eat, calories, sleep cycles. So tell us a little about that. I know this is completely out of career talk, but I think being healthy is always important and necessary.
Yeah, I think, Siddha, you would agree that sleep is more important than people uh, usually get.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, for sure.
Whatever hacking you are doing, sleep is important. I think we like to boast that we haven't slept in this time and that, and that's probably really bad. So don't do that. Other than maybe if it's a day or two at a real hackathon. But I kid you not. So I think just like any nerd, I wear two watches, but don't mistake it for punctuality. Uh, I have my in cloud, weight stored in cloud for the last 10 years, my heart rate for the last 5 to 6 years now stored somewhere. Uh, and I've done linear, like regression modeling on how my uh, sleep affects my heart rate, resting heart rate, exercise affects heart rate, and just learn some fun facts while doing that. And that's why sleep is a good example. Why you should not take stress is a really great thing to do.
Yeah,
In apart from
yeah,
sometimes you have to do. Uh, and even like food and things like that. So I'm not as too deep into the world of biohacking, which is like how do you hack your body to get better. But I've been on a keto diet, so I've lost 90 pounds. I was a big chubby guy, uh, and I think when I had to go to Carnegie Mellon, I said, this is not happening. I'm too slow. So I lost weight. But then recently I lost some more, in the middle, I tried new things and just going keto diet, which is basically just removing any like carbohydrates from your diet, losing weight like water without doing anything. So I haven't had sugar or rice or those kind of things. But the cool thing happens is when people try to do medical evaluations of like what's happening and how to improve yourself. So there's a website called I'll share it, but it's basically people trying to like come up with these scientific studies of what happens when you eat what and things, and going into the world of what Andre Karpathy is saying, which is biohacking. In
yeah.
fact, there was this company which went on Shark Tank and totally bombed their pitch. And I was a user. I was like, I could have presented your thing better as a user than like the way you're pitching this out to be. But it's a fascinating thing, a world of if you collect numbers, you can actually have proof in the pudding without sugar.
Yeah, and that's probably another, hackathon or a side idea for the audience, right? Um, Understanding metrics of the body and how it impacts the sleep cycle. I think that's something that hasn't been done
So,
from an
so
AI perspective.
fun story. Fitbit, the watch company, has their APIs open. So you could actually take that and look at like during the time you have your examinations, what happens to your heart rate. Uh, one time I went for skydiving, and I noticed just watching the airplane got my heart rate up. Then sitting in the airplane, it was kind of okay. And then, like, you know, somebody threw me out. The heart rate went, at some level which my watch could.
Yeah, that's pretty exciting.
So so I literally collect photographs of my heart rate.
That's a good data set to train on.
True.
So, slightly switching gears once again, we have a question from Abhinav. And since you worked a lot in inclusivity and developing applications for the blind community, I think this question is really relevant. And the question is, how do we activate change making in the differently abled ecosystem utilizing a combination of design, technical, social platforms, and sometimes these platforms may already exist. So how do we really utilize them?
Very true. So I wanted to basically put the theme of the word impact for that very question. And maybe first go a little tangential towards career impact, and then maybe towards the, how we can define it here. So, when people go for jobs, they think that, the having studied in a university and having done the courses is how I get measured by. And in my career, I have worked in a big company or a small company. I have a new fancy title at Tesla or like Facebook. That is how they will measure me. And actually, it's not totally true. Uh, your branding might be one of those factors, but really the way people actually measure you in your career is through the word impact. When you go to the interview, let's say this is your first job or second job or let's say third job, they will be trying to measure like what did you actually do that made a real impact, like what did you propose, what was the effect, how did you lead that, uh, in in ways like even if you're an individual contributor you can be a leader for that. So the word impact is something often which is measurable and which has a value. And so you can work on non-impactful things, and just because people have told you, and you are just working for a salary, or you can work for impactful projects, whichever company you are, right? So I've seen people who would join Google, or machine learning people, and joining Google for nothing to do with machine learning, just because they are getting Google on their brand name as an example, and it is fine, right? But they also had a role for a machine learning role from other companies which just didn't have a Google brand name, right? Even at the same salary level is my point. Uh, so, and now that I look at their resume, like many years later, they didn't have that impact statement yet, right? Like now that they had the opportunity.
So
So
getting the impact statement is not even the statement, but realizing what the impact of the work is. I think that is important.
exactly, and so when you now interview at a new company, they will level you based on the impact you had put in the last few companies. They are not going to level you based on the position you had in the last company, right? I think that is a very important thing to
Yeah.
understand. So find that impact. Now that you are already thinking in the impact world, the other question is like, okay, when you're going to die, your life will be measured based on that impact, essentially, uh, in a way. So the respect will come not because like you were a director at something, but because of this is what you did. And if you want to measure your life with that, you'd start to think that there are more opportunities in life of things that can utilize your talent, which might or might not be related to your day job or salary.
Yeah.
Sometimes you go full time into that impact mode. Sometimes, okay, I have a day job at this company at Flipkart working on this, and during my evenings and weekends, I can mentor people and make some sort of an impact, right? I can mentor people, or I can build a project in open source which might be useful for others in this particular way, right? And things would happen, and it's quite possibly that you might not be the ultimate change maker, but because of your work, it gave somebody the platform to make
Yeah.
that,
Other people can build on your work. I think, yeah, that's very relevant.
right? So, for
And
instance, when I look at the people who literally have founded this group and are running this group for
yeah,
years, those are like the impact makers,
yeah,
right?
change
Trying to figure
makers,
out
right?
how flow is opening this opportunity
Yeah.
uh, for people. Now, if you are getting that opportunity, you could also see that maybe my impact could be on people who might not even have the resources. A big problem in Bay Area is that, and especially in the world of AI, is that we think very first world problems. Um, oh, I will just put this model into this on this the most expensive iPhone and I'll change the world. It doesn't work like that, right? People don't
Yeah, yeah.
correction and we're talking about like iPhone, I don't know.
Knowing your audience. Knowing
Exactly.
your audience is important. Yeah.
Uh, so if you can quantify the value of your impact, it might actually be the smallest thing, can make days and nights of change with the smallest thing uh, in a rural community compared to, uh, compared to
Yeah.
other places, which might just be looking pretty cool.
Yeah.
So the one thing I have really found is finding sharing and motivating yourself with stories of change makers is a good way to like get up on your feet and like actually I'll try something. If you're learning AI, maybe try a project for AI for good. Try a project on climate change. Try a project for like poverty prediction using satellite maps. Try a project on something for people with disabilities. Ironically, most of my projects started as a project for people with disabilities and ended up totally in a different direction sometimes. Like they help people with disabilities, but it ended up opening computer vision API, speech recognition API, or features, uh, APIs to recognize where your camera is in the real world, which might be a project actually for blind users in a way, right?
Yeah.
So, but eventually the value will come to the community that you made the thing for. So, surrounding yourself with that kind of environment and taking those things for motivations is great for yourself, but also great for your resume in a way, right? Like people will like, okay, like that's good leadership that you have seen,
Yeah.
and an
Yeah.
exciting project to show off.
And I think the impact that you're mentioning is also long-term impact because, when you envision a project, you may think that the impact is X, but in reality, down the years, the impact may actually be XYZ. So, and that's where, other people picking up your project and building on it, that really makes the difference.
So I'll
And I
give a
guess
quick.
that's really why the IEEE is called your work life changing, right?
So I wanted to share a quick tip. Um, let's say you want to work for people in the blind community, right? Or people, let's say blind community, right? The Now you will build a model, but like, will people really use it? Like that is, this part of the story. And so always be that devil's advocate. Like, how will people even get my thing? Like, will my app be big enough? So the trick is release it in open source, show that it's valuable, and then contact teams within the big companies saying, hey, I built this, and don't go sell, totally in a and contact them, look, I know that you have a product, and if it helps out, I would love to contribute. Or maybe you can feel free to use some of this as one things to get to
Kind of
the
like for open-ended conversations.
exactly, because all the things that you usually see in the industry are built on open research, right? They might not use the same code that you wrote, right? But they get influenced with what's happening out there, right? So this might be like a way where you can contribute, which essentially influences it going to millions of users. But you made that thing happen, which you might not be able to yourself do, like get to millions yourself. So that is the key thing to realize here.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Um, I have a quick question for Harshit. So I know we started at 8:30 and it's 9:45. So I just wanted to have a quick check-in with Harshit to see if we should keep continuing because we've actually reached over time. Um,
Yeah,
so can we go on if you have time, Anirudh?
yeah.
Awesome, awesome. Okay. So I have this really nice question brought up. And this is a question by Charchit. How will AutoML impact the current trend of AI and ML?
Great question. Um, Part of it is to realize the hype of the word AutoML and the mistaken marketing. Part of it should be realizing the reality of where AutoML really is. And I think these would be the two pillars I would start with before going deeper. So keep in mind that neural architecture search, which is what most people think is AutoML. Uh, okay, maybe taking a step back. So, in the classical ML world, when people said AutoML, tools like Teapot, it's basically like I have a data set. I need to train a really good machine learning model. Can we try these 10 machine learning models and can we do the hyperparameter optimization all automatically? So you have Data Robot, you have Teapot, some of these things which work on top of scikit-learn to do these experiments, right? And give you the final answer like what is the best features that you can get. And then back in, I think, 2017, Google had this great work on neural architecture search, which is given this data set, which is the best model architecture you can come up with. So now humans used to design the architecture, and now you're letting AI design the architecture. It's like we don't even have a job now to do like what to do. Uh, so that was neural architecture search. Great. And then eventually, this used to take a lot of time, like a lot of time. Uh, so then people started to optimize it. It used to take like, I remember like,
It came down from like a couple of years to 4 hours.
exactly,
Eventually, I think that was the NASNet mobile network.
exactly, couple of years. And then people started to speed it up. So took 4 hours, 5 hours, right? So great. But then people realized that we can actually train these models which are dependent on the device. So mobile phone model will be different from a model which will be on the GPU. So latency was another consideration apart from accuracy. So that is the research world of neural architecture search, right? A tool came out called AutoKeras. You can actually use it where you give it a problem, and as long as it's not too big, it will design a model for you. Just search for AutoKeras that you can even try on your own. Just give it a small problem, not a big one. Great. And then um, uh, I think the marketing team at Google took that term AutoML and started saying that we are offering AutoML, which was basically transfer learning and fine tuning. It was not the neural architecture.
Automating the entire pipeline.
So
Yeah.
the paper was called AutoML, and marketing said we are doing AutoML, which was just transfer learning. And many people out there did not realize it. So now everybody is saying, oh, Google is doing AutoML, which might or might not be totally true. Maybe they are selecting the best featureizer model to then do the fine tuning, which is totally true. Uh, but the impression what people are getting is different from what the reality is in industry. Research wise, it's a different story. So that's the one part. The second part is also the latency. The time it takes to train these models is not the easiest one. So, for example, many of the new models, I believe, EfficientNet is one of those examples which was trained using AutoML. Uh,
Yeah. I think even maybe efficient detect is another one of the detection networks. I mean,
efficient,
there's a whole plethora of tools and models now.
exactly. So that's a great world, uh, but I don't think it is we are realistically at that place when it can do. I mean, it can train a CNN. Maybe tomorrow somebody will train a CNN for like a image captioning problem eventually. So I think the this will keep going, closer and
Yeah.
closer and closer towards that becoming more and more realistic.
Yeah, and in terms of tools, I think it would be good to see how what is that arsenal or that tool belt that you have that is always useful in most of your projects, and how do you actually keep on iterating all those tools on and on.
I like to say that computer vision is the showcase exciting kind of projects.
Hmm.
NLP training a network to do something basic in text is like the skill which you will be eventually paid for. But the biggest skill which people totally miss out on is data analysis. Like I would have these bright students from Stanford who know every theory of machine learning but cannot do like basic data analysis, take the piece of data, visualize it, find patterns in it before you do the machine learning. Because 90 to 95% of the work in the real world is really about, not 95, but 85 to 90% of the problem is really how to play with the data, be that data janitor, find themes inside that data, how do you
Yeah.
load that data, clean it up before you feed the AI model or the machine learning model. So there's a website called dataquest.io. I really recommend anybody who's like trying to really get good at this, because when you go to interviews, often than not, they will give you a take-home assignment. Where they'll give you a data set, and turns out that if you can't do basic data analysis, training the AI part is the easier one.
Yeah. And I think that brings a very important difference between work in the academic area versus the industry. Because most academic data sets, they are relatively clean when compared to the industrial data sets.
Mhm.
And having that level of knowledge and having a working portfolio that people can look into, I think that is also helpful for people, starting out in their careers or looking for jobs. We have another interesting question from Raman from Facebook, and
Is
he
it about jobs?
asks, sorry,
Is it about jobs?
it's about inspiration.
I like
Who is your inspiration in the technical world? That's a deep question.
Okay, I will have to take a pass. So usually what happens is most people who are inspirational are not maybe even well known. It's
Yeah,
usually what happens is that you meet these people and hear their story of perseverance, and it does not need to be technical. It is just that how much the levels they can go to make sure they will make things happen, and
yeah,
they get things happen. I think that is what I find more inspirational.
yeah. And I feel that, inspiration isn't something that you can only get from one person. It's, there are some things that you can learn from someone, some other things that you can learn from someone else. So I think it's kind of like a multifaceted pick and choose kind of an approach.
Exactly. So I usually say this that you know there's a psychological effect that when you meet people who know more than you think you don't know anything. But before, when you did not meet many people, you thought like you're too better than them. So what happens is people, and I'm the worst case also at one point, where I went from thinking that I'm a this arrogant person who knows this
A know
many
it
programming
all
languages.
to none it all, maybe.
Yeah, to coming to Canada and seeing real PhDs and just going like the other way and stop talking. But the reality is that when you see somebody who's better than you, it's not about jealousy. You should actually be inspired and say, I would want to be like that person. And when you see somebody who is maybe less, then you should ask like, how can I help them to bring them to my level, right? And it's like it's not quick pro quo kind of a
Yeah,
work.
life is a journey. You
Exactly.
help and you get help. Yeah,
So the moment you keep getting inspired by people who know more than you will eventually, try to get there. Use
yeah,
that bisect median algorithm to get to at least the median point between you and them.
yeah.
I think
That's a
that's
technical approach to it. Yeah.
so. The last question, actually, you raised a really good point about the showcase projects, and maybe I can mention a little bit about the job process, like looking from the eyes of somebody who has done who sits on the interview panel.
Yeah. We actually have a couple of questions, and yeah, please go ahead.
Okay. Um, So, so a lot of people. I was reading some of the questions also on the chat, and which are, I think we said that you'll have to tell their names soon. But how to get a job? So the
In
question
short,
is
yeah.
how to get a job or how to get a job in AI. Okay, and people usually go online and say this answer is that I need to do lead code, and yeah, I'm ready for a job. I think that's the answer I usually read. Uh, Probably not the best answer for AI. It's maybe software engineering, but there's a big flaw in it. So let me re-answer it. How to get a job? There are actually two questions to answer for to get a job. The first answer is how do I get to the interview room? And then the second question is how do I pass the interview? It's a two-step process, right? And people totally miss out on the answer number one and they try to answer number two. So how to get to the interview room? So one is like, okay, if I am in the interview room, let's assume everything is hanky dory. They will ask me a question on machine learning. I will answer this. What is L1 versus L2 regression? I'll answer that. What is the difference in precision and recall? I will answer that. People prepare for that, and that's where you do like the basics thoroughly, right? Uh, what they miss out on the fact is that there will be 100 resumes for every job, right? Especially when getting AI knowledge is so easy these days, where you have somebody on an AMA saying that you don't need to know how to code, you can just use Ludwig or Runway ML or Custom Vision.
Yeah, how do you stand out, right?
Exactly. How do you stand out? So I would constantly see there are 100 resumes, and there is one job position I can give. How do I, make that transition? And this was at a startup. I'm not even saying at Microsoft where this ratio is much much higher. Uh, so usually the answer people think is key. Okay, I need a master's and this and that is actually again wrong. I would even in fact go to the level that you don't need a university education to get to the interview room. People are searching for that exceptionalism.